Right. All right. So the last one we got for our relationship styles here is the anxious avoidant or fearful avoidant or disorganized avoidant, they're called, which has avoidant and anxious both mixed. So,
All right, let's do the disorganized.
well, yeah,
And
that's what we're doing. No, those are just all different words for it. It's just a mix of the
oh,
anxious and the avoidant together. Fearful avoidant, anxious avoidant, disorganized attachment, like those are all the same kind of thing. You kind of get ambivalence. They want emotional closeness, but they also have fear of intimacy and vulnerability. So you got that inner conflict, you get that push and pull,
mm,
um, you know, torn between they want the connection and they're afraid of rejection. And then you get unpredictable behavior. They can be super loving, super emotionally close, and then all of a sudden they distance themselves because they're overwhelmed with something. It may not even be anything to do with your relationship. Maybe they're overwhelmed about work. Maybe they're overwhelmed about a friend or a family member they're having issues with, or something going on in their life in the background that starts to overwhelm them. And then all of a sudden they're super close with the person and they just pull away for no person. And the other person's like, what's going on? And these people don't communicate or express their feelings well. Like with the avoidant, they can't express their emotions. They're not comfortable being emotionally vulnerable. So maybe they don't want to share that they're in a fight with their best friend, or they're in a fight with their mother, brother, sister, uncle,
I have a
cousin.
question. I
Okay.
have a question. In regards to maybe adults that were like abused as children, whether it was like physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse. Where do you think a majority falls, or what's it kind of been like the census when you read about it? I mean, I kind of have
Um,
an opinion on it just from like a psychology therapist point of view, but like I'm wondering what the statistics.
I mean, not statistics from a lot of what I've seen and just from personal experience. Dating somebody that was like this. It's trauma. It could be any type.
But where do they fall? Like the abuse, the ones that have had abuse, physical abuse, sexual, verbal abuse, because that's abuse on a complete spectrum.
You know, I don't think
Do you think that in and
overarching
out of, in and out?
overarchingly, I think there any of those could cause
Mm,
it. I think the trauma that if somebody's sexually abused by a family member, or somebody's constantly verbally abused by a
mm,
parent, or
mm-hmm,
if you had a parent that's an alcoholic or drug addict, so they show up
mm-hmm,
inconsistently, and
mm,
maybe they're fine and they're very loving, but that one night of the week that they come home drunk and they go off on you, or they,
mm,
hit you or smack you in the face, not necessarily beat you, but use physical discipline on you because you did some little thing
mm.
to a child, to that person that's supposed to be your caregiver. That's just a huge trauma. It's a huge breach of trust. And that's another thing. These people have fear of abandonment, trust issues, because they're so used to being hyper vigilant to, is this person going to be okay today, or is today the day that they're coming home drunk? Or it could be worse if your parents coming home drunk 7 days a week and beating you, or if you have one parent that's gives you that emotion, and the other parent that doesn't. You get that inconsistency. And
Mm.
with the anxious avoidant, you do get inconsistent behavior because they have inner turmoil, self-doubt because of these unrelated issues. And as a child, it kind of makes you feel like you're unworthy of your parents' love. What did I do wrong? What, as a little kid, if you're 4 or 5 years old, you don't know your dad or your mom's coming home drunk, or you don't know mom just nailed a bottle of wine down in the other room, or she does it every night. So you don't, she's having a glass of wine. I don't know what that is. I'm 5. And why all of a sudden did she just come in and, smack me upside the head because I left my crayons on the kitchen table? And you feel ashamed, or you feel embarrassed, or like, I disappointed them. So you feel in that unworthiness of love, maybe, and
You
you get
also,
those
what do you
fears of
not?
letting your partner down, maybe.
I think it's bigger than that. You don't feel safe on the planet. You don't feel
That's
like
trust
anyone.
issues. You don't feel
And
safe. You don't feel comfortable.
yeah, and so that's is as you get older and you go into the relationships, you're like, I don't feel safe. This is uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel feelings. So then you start to probably go in and out of all those,
I
you
think
know,
that's a lot of it with the anxious avoidant ones. If they actually connect with a person and they start having a connection or falling in love or catching a feeling or what have you, they have difficulty with that emotional regulation. So they want this. This is what they want. They definitely want this. They're not trying to, on a conscious level, be like, oh my God, I'm falling in love with this person. Let me push them away. I think they genuinely, for the most part, want a loving relationship, but it's more like their unpredictable behavior and they're going in and out of those anxious and avoidant energies. It's like a roller coaster for both people. And
And on that point, good point, it's an emotional response from when we had it from when we were young. I mean, I remember, I'll give an example. My mother was very inconsistent. She drank, she went out to nightclubs, she brought, I don't care, I'm putting this publicly, she brought men home every different weekend. I'm lucky I didn't get molested, honestly. And I remember always having a constant stomach ache. Always. I was always nervous,
mhm.
anxious. I didn't feel safe. I'm like, I don't like this planet. I didn't even want to be here. I was like really dark thoughts at like 8 years old. I was just like, I don't fucking like this place.
Mm.
Right. Um, and um as I got older and I'd get in relationships, that stomach ache, that feeling in my stomach was like would come up. And I would be like, why am I having this feeling? Until I would be like, oh my God, that's my original encounter with a relationship. And, it didn't really give anything. So that anxiousness would come up. And then I would also go into avoidant as well. I would switch all over the place because I didn't like how I felt when I would get triggered by, feelings of love and stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, I with the anxious avoidance, I think they feel being torn between
Mm,
wanting a connection,
hmm
wanting to be loved, and then if you find a person and you're starting to get there, then all
mm,
of a sudden that fear of rejection creeps in.
mm,
Everything's going great, and then all of a sudden
hmm
this fear of rejection creeps in, and that gives you that roller coaster ride. And fear of abandonment and trust issues, like you're just talking about, like you didn't trust the situation. Like, I don't know if mom's going to come home drunk and yell at me, smack me
mm,
around, have some random drunk guy with her that I don't know, and I'm a little kid and I'm going to be afraid of the stranger. Like,
mm,
yeah, obviously that makes you very anxious. And like you said, you had
mm.
stomach aches, you probably had like ulcers or something when you were little over it. Serious, you know.
No, I mean, I got taken. I went in with my dad when I was 10 and I had a healthy, supportive relationship with him. But that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like, just because one person was super spiritual, loving, and this other person was like abusive, I still really had like a lot of shit to look at, to work on,
Hmm.
because I was like, you know, and then it came up in my relationships and I shared that. I'd be like, oh, this was my trauma. And the person I was with was like, when we like started to do bad, he was like evil and he'd use it against me and say like, oh well, your own mother didn't even love you. She was able to like leave you, so whatever. And it's like, if you do the healing work, you will feel good inside eventually. I just want to
Hmm.
say that to people.
Yes,
we
absolutely.
we don't we don't need another adult to tell us like you're good enough. We can find that within, and it doesn't really matter how we were treated as a child or how we were treated in relationships romantically. Like, we should choose like our friends and people that treat us well. But when people hurt us, it's not our fault, and it's something that we don't really have to take accountability for if we weren't doing anything intentional, right?
Hmm.
So because a lot of empaths, I'm one, my intuition, I can feel everything. And I'm super, my dreams are psychic, everything's very open for me, energies and everything. So I really had to like learn to be like, this is not my stuff, that's their stuff. They're living a different way, their soul is not awake. Whatever is going on with someone that's constantly hurting
Hmm.
another person, whether it's children or their partner, or and unfortunately sometimes the cycle keeps fucking repeating until people really look at themselves. Like, I remember saying like, I'm not going to be how my mother was, I'm ending that cycle. Done.
I get the same way with my kids. I hug them, kiss them, tell them I love them all the time. I make it weird. I make so they know they're gonna know. Like, but you know, just to speak quickly on what you were saying, is you're absolutely right. Other people's behavior is not on you. You know, you can't
Mhm.
control other people's behavior, and you don't have to tolerate it either. You know, you can
No.
just not, put them aside or cut them off. But I think a
And you don't
lot
even have to figure out why. Like I've had people say to me over, chats and counseling and things, why did they do this to me?
doesn't
Why?
matter. It's
Some,
not on you. They did it.
well, sometimes it does, there is no why. It's just they're fucking broken
Hmm.
and they don't treat themselves well. And when you don't treat yourself well inside, you're most likely not going to treat anyone else well either. So it's an inside job.
Yep.
Like if we're loving and we're good to ourselves and we're being like kind and everything, like we're mostly going to be good to the people around us too. I mean,
Yep.
it's a reflection. It's
It is.
all a reflection. All right. So
Hurt people. And that's so true. It really is. If you're hurting inside, you're going to lash out and hurt somebody else, whether you love them or care about them or not. You're going to project your own shit onto them. Or I've heard it described as, oh, people that are in like anxious avoidant, if their partner tries to confront them, not in a negative way, tries to initiate an uncomfortable conversation with them, and they're avoidant, so they don't want to talk about it. You'll have a fight or something will happen and you won't talk for 4 or 5 days, and then the other person might act like nothing happened. I've done it before. I'm guilty of
mhm.
this. I have a fight or whatever, and then 2 or 3 days later, you talk and you guys kind of just pretend it didn't happen. And if the other person tries to initiate that uncomfortable conversation with them, well, that's when you get the avoidant, and they'll start pulling away. Or if you try and uh, push the issue, and I'm not saying in a causing a fight, is like, hey, can we talk about this or whatever? And then you'll get the projection. They'll lash out at you. They'll get verbally aggressive, not necessarily picking on you, but like you said, oh, your own mother didn't love you, or like just they're going to
Mm,
use their words to lash out. And as soon as those words come out of their mouth, they probably want to take them back. But they
mm.
just did as a defense mechanism, because I want to avoid this difficult conversation. So I'm going to project some of my hurt onto you because you're making me feel uncomfortable right now. You're making me feel guilty. You're making me feel accountable. This is your fault. So I'm going to lash back out at you. And
Yeah,
that,
and in the end, the person's soul, they're broken. That's why they're talking like that.
right. But that
If
goes back
someone
to self love. If you do not love yourself, and you haven't worked through your traumas or your issues or your own triggers, or you can't hold yourself accountable or be accountable to another person, no other person's going to give you that. You're not going to be able to love another person if you can't address your own shit.
yeah,
And that's it. None of your relationships are going to work. They're all going to go
no.
back. Or you're going to get somebody that's, let's say they're an anxious avoidant, and they project and they do that, and they get with like a submissive person that's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to set you off. And then these people get into long-term miserable relationships where they're
Mm.
not being fulfilled. They're just with somebody and they're like their emotional punching bag, and you
Well,
never do
that's
any
the
growth and you
abuse.
never take
That's
accountability, and you go
it's
in
the
that cycle
abuse.
again.
Yeah, it's the abuse cycle. All right, let's
Mhm.
wrap this up. And
I think
any any any
I think you
final
can
thoughts?
I think when you boil it all down with, anxious avoidant trying to get out of that, what do you got?
No, it's what I said earlier. It is safe for you to love. Open your heart to give and receive the highest energy of all. I mean, the whole reason we come here is for a love exchange. Um, whether we know it or not. I mean, that's the only thing that goes with us when we go to the other side is our spirit, our heart, our soul. Like we don't really take anything else. And I think that if you can get to the place where you are love inside, then however it shows up or whatever's happened and whatever's happened to you and whatever's gonna happen to you, like it doesn't matter because like we all have the capability inside for unconditional love, you know?
Hmm. Well, to boil it all down with anxious avoidance, they don't feel worthy of love on the inside, and they have to address their own things, their past traumas, but they don't feel worthy of that love. And you got the anxious and the avoidant. They're not going to take accountability. They're going to avoid those difficult conversations. And they're going to have that relationship style. They get with somebody, they like them, things are good. Then you get some, maybe some conflict comes in, and then you get them avoiding, them pulling away, and then the other person might try and push as to why, and then they're like, oh my god, that fear of enmeshment, oh my god, they're all over me, why don't they leave me alone? And then they just end it, and they feel a breather. Okay, I'm relieved now, I don't have to deal with any of that shit, this person's gone, I feel better now, and they feel that relief for a while. And then they get that guilt, anxiety. Why don't my relationships ever work? Why doesn't anybody love me? Why can't I be loved?
Mm.
Why do I always push people away? And then they get into another relationship and do it all over again. And just at the end of it, you got to address the issues and work on
All
yourself,
right.
love yourself. And that's it. It's the only way to fix it.
Yep. And come to